From Studio 3B in New York, here again is Jane Pauley.
If you've ever wanted a baby, but months of waiting turned into years, you'll know the excitement this young couple felt as they waited for official confirmation of their long-awaited good news. But when it came, there was an ominous postscript attached that set the stage for a terrible decision. A mother's choice: my life or my baby's.
Come on, you're sport. You look beautiful. I promise you.
Barbara Barton looks the picture of a radiant mother-to-be. But behind the smiling face lies a heart full of worries.
Dad, come show us her tummy.
We've been married 12 and a half years and had never done anything to stop a pregnancy, and it took 8 years for Taylor.
Hi.
Jeff and Barbara Barton of Eugene, Oregon, had wanted a family from the start. And 3 years after Taylor, their first child was born, when they were nearly ready to give up on a second baby and a bigger family, there it was.
She had a positive home test, and so we went down and got that blood test and came back home and waited for her call.
Were you here when the call came?
Yeah, I heard the phone ring. Thought, oh, here it is. You know, I was smiling to myself. And a minute or so later, Taylor came out, said, "Daddy, Mommy needs you right away." And so I thought, well, it's negative.
Jeff was wrong. His 35-year-old wife was pregnant. But there was another piece of news that day.
Barb was on the couch and was upset. And I just said, "So it's negative?" She said, "No, it's not." She says, "What does this mean?" "My white cells are extremely elevated." When they say it's elevated, it could mean it could be an infection. It could be a lot of things.
Even though Barbara had no symptoms, she and Jeff feared the worst. They'd met at Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene. Jeff, an ICU nurse's aide, Barbara, a medical transcriptionist. After working in a hospital for more than 10 years, they had seen this before.
December 8th.
In her diary, Barbara wrote of her growing concern.
Very upset.
Very upset.
Several
sinking dark moments.
I feel like
it would be easier if I would just have an accident. Dr. James Fitzgibbons confirmed their suspicions. It was leukemia, a cancer that affects the blood. Barbara's white blood cell count was 20 times normal. It seemed nature was playing a mean trick.
This is the only case I've seen of chronic leukemia during pregnancy. It's been reported it does occur, but it's very rare.
The Bartons had no time to celebrate the news of a second baby. Their focus quickly shifted to Barbara's fight against this often fatal disease.
Cross-match.
The most aggressive treatment was a bone marrow transplant, the doctor told them. But that posed a cruel dilemma.
If she chooses transplantation, then she would need to have an abortion.
A fetus could not survive the heavy doses of chemotherapy and radiation. What's more, even if it worked, the treatment would leave Barbara sterile. She would never have another child. Her best chance at life carried a high price.
December 9th.
December 9th, 1993.
Too hard to write about
Too hard to write about feelings. Hard to face up to it. Jeff and I are both feeling very weak-kneed. We're in shock. Did you presume at that time that you would have to terminate the pregnancy?
I was concerned about that. We had questions about that. I asked Barb, this is your body. Yeah, we've been trying, but you're my wife. That is my first concern.
Barbara wasn't sure what to do. Postponing the transplant for 8 months till the baby was born certainly reduced the odds. But the effect of the pregnancy on the cancer, that was the big unknown. Should she bet her own life she'd beat the odds?
I consider about 50% chance of cure with bone marrow transplantation. She's a young person and had been in good health, and I think she thought that her chances were probably much better than 50-50.
Piper Shanks worked at the hospital, too. She and Barbara were best friends and confidants since junior high school. Is it your impression that Barbara ever seriously considered having an abortion?
Oh, yeah, and she agonized over it. I mean, it was like, what if I die and leave Jeff with with this baby and with Taylor? Will he be able to handle it? And what is he going to do? And in fact, one day she was kind of mad at Jeff because Jeff wouldn't tell her to abort.
Our first visit with the Bardens occurred at approximately 9 weeks pregnant.
Then came more news from neonatal specialist Dr. David Jackson, a thunderbolt, which seemed to settle the matter, for Barbara at least.
And we had the opportunity then to immediately identify 2 sacs containing the twins.
December 14th, 1993. Next surprise in our life, twins. All Jeff could do was cry. What a wild week. How did that change things when you found out and there were 2 little hearts flashing?
As soon as he said, "It looks like we have twins," she turned her head around and looked at the screen, a big old smile on her face. And I knew there was nothing more to be said. We went home, called everybody. It's twins, it's twins.
Why did 2 babies have so much more impact than one might have?
She looked at it like, it's difficult for me to get pregnant. What timing? You know, this is a gift from God.
It was a sign.
Yeah. So she wanted to give them everything she could.
Barbara made up her mind. She was going to have it all, beat the cancer and have her babies too. She decided to hold off on the potentially life-saving bone marrow transplant until after the twins were born. In the meantime, her doctor began a less aggressive cancer regimen 3 times a week.
We initially chose leukapheresis, which is where large amounts of white blood cells are filtered off the blood. It turned out to be very hard on her. Her veins were clotting off. The fluid
January
shifts and the blood
13th and
pressure
14th,
changes during that
1994. Miserable. Sore neck and back. Generally wiped out. After the first trimester, Dr. Fitzgibbon switched the treatment to a form of chemotherapy, not without risk to the fetuses, but less toxic than some.
She tolerated it very well. Blood counts came down to satisfactory levels, and the ultrasounds showed good progress of the fetuses.
And more good news. Her younger brother was a perfect match for the bone marrow transplant she'd have once the babies were born. It seemed another sign she'd made the right choice.
Right around spring of last year, and she was doing okay, and she was working a little bit here and there, planted all of her bulbs and got the garden going, and was excited about being pregnant, not thinking about the leukemia.
Someone who was planting bulbs in the soil was someone who was still very connected. And that's really what sustained her, isn't it? Mm-hmm. The shred of hope that she could have it all. Mm-hmm. A cure, mm-hmm. a family with 3 children, a loving husband, and a long life.
Right. That was what we were really striving to do. It's never a guarantee.
July 13th, 1994, a boy named Hunter and a girl named Mackenzie were born. 7 pounds 4 ounces and 6 pounds 11 ounces, respectively. Both were healthy, although Mackenzie was born with a cleft palate that doctors say was unrelated to Barbara's cancer treatments and can be corrected later. Were you happy?
Very.
Cigars and...
Yeah, passed out 1 or 2 of those, but I was relieved that now we can go on and, okay, the pregnancy's done, and we're going to go to phase 2 here, and that is to get rid of the leukemia.
Barbara had just 2 weeks with her newborn babies when she started running a constant fever, and her white blood cell count soared. It was the leukemia calling, with a vengeance.
It's what they called a blast crisis, and as I understand it, this is that phase that that we took the chance on, and it's still very feasible for the bone marrow transplant to work. It just means we have to go now.
We have to go now.
Right. We left that night.
But you had 2 babies and a 4-year-old.
And a 4-year-old that we had to explain that Mommy is leaving and will be gone for a long time.
With only hours' notice, Piper Shanks fit newborn twins and a 4-year-old into her busy life and small home, while Jeff shuttled between Eugene and Stanford Medical Center in California. Nobody could guess how long that arrangement would last. When we come back, how a mother's agonizing choice changed the course of her family's life.
I needed to know what Barb wanted of the kids, what she wanted of me. Is there anything you would like to tell me? Kind of a conversation. And that, no, nobody's giving up.
Returning to our story, just 2 weeks after giving birth to twins, Barbara Barton's leukemia has dramatically worsened. They delayed treatment during her pregnancy in order to protect the babies. Can they make up for so much lost time?
It's now August 13th. A lot has happened.
With an urgency no one expected, Barbara Barton began getting ready for her long-postponed bone marrow transplant at Stanford Medical Center.
We arrived Wednesday.
Had multiple tests. Visit with the doctor, and after the blood test, they decided to admit me. Her diary shows her focus totally on attacking the cancer and getting well. Only 25% of bone marrow transplants are successful once the leukemia reaches a crisis phase. But it seemed Barbara's was a success. The next weeks would be critical.
It takes about 100 days for her immune system going well to recoup enough that she could go back home.
Weeks turned into months. But then Barbara contracted a stubborn virus. Her weakened immune system couldn't seem to fight it off.
The doctors pulled me aside and just said there is virtually no chance that she's going to survive this, and that although her chances are extremely low, they're not at zero yet.
Uncertain about Barbara's future, Jeff decided his family needed to be together. Shortly before Christmas last year, Jeff brought his wife home to the hospital in Eugene. There's this song that you sing to children that always breaks my heart, and it's not supposed to. It's, she always comes back, she always comes back. She never would forget me. And sometimes mommies don't come back.
I tried to be as honest with Taylor and her level as I could. I just said, you know, Mommy's very sick, and that I don't know if she's going to come home. We certainly are trying to do that, but sometimes Jesus needs very special people to be with him, and that your Mommy is a very special person, and she may have to leave. Excuse me.
Hoping for the best but preparing for the worst, Barbara called Jeff and her friend Piper Shanks to her bedside. Another friend, Kit Fisher, was there as a witness to a meeting that ultimately would raise as many questions as it answered. What do you remember Barbara specifically saying?
She was a matter of fact about that she wanted those children to remain with Jeff. She wanted Piper to be their mother figure, their nurturer.
Is that a phrase she used, mother figure?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We talked about the possibilities of other family members taking different children or splitting them up and that kind of thing, and she was very opposed to that. She didn't want that to happen.
2 weeks later, at the end of January, Barbara Barton died in the hospital where her babies were born. Hunter and Mackenzie were then 7 months old. Taylor was 4.
When Barb passed away, I took her into her room and said Jesus needed Mommy, and that she's asleep and won't be coming home. I took her in there, and she kissed her goodbye. That was all she needed to see.
Barbara left her husband, Jeff, a beautiful legacy.
Come here, big guy. Hunter is real easy to get to smile. He's just a real crack-up. Mackenzie's a lot like Barb. She's hot-tempered at times. She's funny at times. He is me, and she is her.
Hi, Kenzie.
All right, here we go.
Taylor lives at home with her father, but Jeff says it's too soon after Barbara's death to handle the responsibility of 3. so the twins still live with Piper.
Good stuff, huh? Yeah, were you hungry, baby?
For now, Jeff grieves for his wife and struggles with the decisions they made, but says one day his family will be together again.
The kids will be coming back over here. But it would be very detrimental to the twins to pull them and just yank them from where they're at, so it has to be done slowly.
When we moved into the house, they were really...
But Piper is making long-term plans to keep the twins at her house. With her 3 sons, age 11 to 16,
This is one crowded room.
in her home, which is packed floor to ceiling with baby things. She's hoping for a formal arrangement. She wants joint custody.
I think he very much plans on it being a 50-50.
What if he changes his mind, Piper? Are you going to hold him to decisions that he's made in crisis? Or are you open to the possibility that he might say, me and my kids need to be under the same roof and we love you, Piper?
Well, yeah, and I told him one of my greatest fears is when they're 5 years old, he says, okay, you did a good job, thanks for your help, and I'm getting remarried and see you later. And he's...
Well, that's not out of the realm of possibility.
It's not. It's not.
And if he did, a new wife might not want joint custody.
Right.
You know?
But that's why I want to protect us from the very beginning and make sure if we've written up some kind of legal arrangements. And Jeffrey, one thing Jeff is faithful. And I mean, he was faithful to Barb through this whole thing. I think he will be true to her wishes.
It was Barbara's idea that that Piper wouldn't just mind the children for the time being, but that she would be almost a co-parent.
That was my understanding. And maybe not on paper. I don't know. We're still discussing that.
Barbara never planned on not being there for her children and her husband. Jeff never planned on being left alone to care for them. Now the legacy of a mother's choice is a father's challenge.
How are you there, Hunter Bob?
Their mother's presence is all over this house. Photographs on the wall, the quilts that she made with her own hands. And
Yeah, they'll never wonder who their mother was, and I'll make darn sure that they know what she did. I have some of the quilts that I have put away for them later.
I mean, talk about a mother's love enveloping a child. The blanket that she made with her own hands. When did she make this?
She made this while she was pregnant, and it was for the babies. Never got to use it for them, but...
Do they say much? Kenzie and Hunter say, Mama.
The twins are beginning to talk. They're calling Piper Mama. And Jeff says Taylor seems to be adjusting as well as a 4-year-old could to losing her mother. Do you know what to do with this? And on this first glorious spring day, Jeff, too, seems like a man starting to come back to life.
I'm doing better. I keep myself busy. The twins and Taylor keep me busy. The times where I do really bad, where I live 1 second at a time, and I can literally just collapse and give up, or I can fight this. And in order for me to fight that, I've got to take a deep breath. And you get through those times. It's that promise that I made Barb that I would go on and I would fight this and I would do okay.
One final note. Jeff can count on some financial help from a fund set up for the kids, but it won't pay the medical bills he's been left with, bills that now total more than $500,000.